People say power protects you, that titles shield you, that success makes you untouchable. Yeah, that's what I used to believe too, until the day a police siren screamed behind me and proved how fast respect can disappear when someone decides they don't like what they see. Because on that afternoon, I wasn't a judge, I wasn't a professional, I wasn't even a person in that officer's eyes. I was just a suspicion. And what happened next still sits in my chest like a stone I can't swallow. See, it was a hot day, the kind where the air feels heavy and the pavement looks like it's melting, and I was driving through downtown in my new car, not speeding, not swerving, just easing along like anybody else heading to lunch after a long morning of work, windows up AC, humming, soft mind, finally slowing down after hours of listening to lawyers argue about things that don't matter to anyone outside a courtroom. I remember thinking how peaceful it felt, how rare that kind of quiet is, you know what I mean, when life gives you 10 minutes without pressure. Then I saw flashing blue lights in my mirror. At first, I figured they were for someone else because I hadn't done anything, but they stayed there right behind me, close enough that I could see the officer's sunglasses reflecting sunlight like two little mirrors. I checked my speed. Fine. Checked my lane. Fine. Signal on clean driving, nothing wrong. Still, the light stayed. So I did what you're supposed to do, what people like me learn early to do carefully. I pulled over, slow, smooth hands, steady, no sudden moves. I lowered my windows, placed my hands on the wheel where they were visible, posture straight, breathing calm. That wasn't fear yet, not exactly. It was awareness. The officer stepped out of his cruiser like he owned the road. Young guy, stiff shoulders that walk. Some men have when they think the badge on their chest is the loudest voice in the conversation. He came up to my window and snapped license and registration. No greeting, no explanation, just a command tossed at me like I was already guilty. I kept my voice even and asked why I'd been stopped polite, steady the same tone I'd used for years on the bench when attorneys tried to dodge questions. His jaw tightened instantly like I'd insulted him just by speaking. He said my temporary tag looked fake and the car matched a stolen vehicle report. Stolen. I almost laughed because I had bought that car 3 days earlier as a quiet little gift to myself after 2 decades of public service. I told him the paperwork was in the glove compartment and I could get it if he wanted. That's when everything shifted. His voice jumped an octave sharp and loud, ordering me not to reach for anything. His hands slid toward his holster. The temperature in that moment dropped about 20 degrees even though the sun was blazing. I slowly put my hands back on the wheel and told him my name, told him I was a federal judge, told him my credentials were on the passenger seat. I wasn't bragging. I was warning him. He smirked like I'd told him I was the Queen of England and said, "Yeah, sure you are. Step out of the car." People had started watching from the sidewalk, phones coming out because these scenes don't surprise folks anymore. I stayed calm and said again that he was making a mistake. He started counting. 1, 2, and before he even got to 3, he grabbed my arm, yanked me out, slammed me against the side of my own car and shouted, "Stop resisting," even though I hadn't moved. The metal cuffs snapped tight around my wrists, biting into bone, and I said quietly, they were too tight that they hurt. He leaned close and told me I should have thought about that before stealing a car. I remember staring straight ahead, jaw clenched, telling myself, don't react, don't give him anything he can twist, just survive this moment. He shoved me into the back of his cruiser and radioed that he had a suspect in custody and needed a tow for a stolen vehicle. A tow. For my car. Sitting there in the back seat, plastic bench under me, wrists burning, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not yet, but disbelief. Because I'd spent my career telling people the system works if you follow the rules, and I had followed every rule. At the station, he dragged me out and sat me on a bench cuffed to a rail like I might bolt through a wall. He asked my name again, and I told him, then said I wanted an attorney and that my ID was in my purse. He laughed and told another officer I was pretending to be federal. They took my fingerprints, pressing my hand down harder than necessary, and then the machine beeped. Not a normal beep, a sharp, urgent sound. The screen flashed red. The older sergeant nearby leaned in, squinted, and his face went pale so fast it looked like the blood just ran away. On the monitor was my official portrait in judicial robes with my name and title underneath. The sergeant whispered, "Oh no," then louder, "Uncuff her. Now." The young officer frowned, confused, still not understanding, and the sergeant snapped, "She's a federal judge." The whole room went quiet like someone had pulled the plug on sound. I looked straight at the officer and said softly, "I told you." A captain rushed in minutes later, clearly panicked, asking what happened. I explained in plain words. I was driving legally, your officer arrested me, assaulted me, ignored my identification. I want my property, I want a lawyer, and I want his badge number for my lawsuit. The officer tried to defend himself, saying the plate matched a stolen vehicle. The captain cut him off and said he'd already checked. The officer had typed the plate wrong, mixed up a letter and a number, and flagged an old report from decades ago. A typo. That was the foundation for everything that had just happened. I said I was going to the hospital to document my injuries and they'd better preserve every second of camera footage. Then I walked out. I didn't slam a door, didn't raise my voice, didn't threaten, I just left. Over the next couple days, the department tried to spin the story, suggesting I'd been uncooperative, hinting it was all a misunderstanding. But video has a funny way of telling the truth people wish would stay quiet. The footage leaked. Millions watched it. They saw him yelling while I sat still, saw him ignore my warning, saw him drag me out, heard him misread the plate out loud. People online dug into his past and found old posts, complaints, things the department had brushed aside. Suddenly the narrative changed. I filed a civil rights lawsuit, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted a record that said clearly what happened was wrong. The city offered a settlement early. I declined. They offered more. I declined again. Because sometimes money before truth is just hush cash with better packaging. When the trial started, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, citizens, observers, people who'd seen the video and wanted to witness what came next. The officer sat across from me in a plain suit, looking smaller than he had on the roadside. My attorney spoke calmly to the jury about trust, about authority, about what happens when power meets prejudice. The defense called it a mistake, said he acted in good faith, said stress made him misjudge. Then the video played, frame by frame, over and over. When the officer testified, my attorney asked him what he feared when I reached toward the glove box after announcing I was getting paperwork. The officer hesitated. My attorney said paper cuts. A few jurors smiled despite themselves. Later, a sergeant testified that after learning who I was, the officer muttered in the locker room that I was probably a diversity hire and maybe I'd stolen my credentials too. That sentence hung in the courtroom like smoke. You could feel the air change. After that, the word mistake didn't sound convincing anymore. The jury deliberated for hours. I sat outside sipping water, telling myself whatever happens, at least the truth was spoken out loud. When we were called back in, the clerk read the verdict. Liability on every count. False arrest, excessive force, malicious prosecution, damages, $160,000. The officer exhaled like he thought he'd dodged something. Then the clerk continued. Punitive damages against him personally, $750,000, total $910,000. The room went silent, that deep, stunned silence you feel in your bones. I covered my face and cried, not because of the number, but because 12 strangers had looked at the evidence and said, "We see what happened to you." Outside reporters crowded around. I told them the verdict wasn't just money, it was a message that authority doesn't excuse abuse. Later, the officer asked his lawyer if the city would cover it. The lawyer told him the city pays for mistakes, not malice. He was responsible for the rest, and that's when the real consequences began. The city paid part, but the rest followed him like a shadow. His accounts were garnished, property seized, career ended, certification revoked. Meanwhile, I did something people didn't expect. I donated most of the award to a legal defense fund for people who can't afford to fight back when they're mistreated. Because I kept thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't had a title, a voice, a camera recording. Years later, I saw him again by chance, working a quiet job, shoulders slumped, eyes tired. He looked at me like he wanted to speak but didn't know how. I told him, "I hope you're learning." Then I walked away. I didn't feel triumph. I felt closure. But here's the question that still sparks arguments whenever this story comes up. Was the outcome justice, or was it too harsh? Some people say he got exactly what he deserved. Others say one terrible decision shouldn't destroy a life. So I want you to tell me what you think. If you'd been in my place, would you have pushed the case all the way, or would you have taken the settlement and moved on? And have you ever witnessed a moment where someone was judged before they even spoke? Share your thoughts, your experiences, your side of it in the comments, because these conversations matter more than people realize.